avoid her because I didn't feel comfortable. And she said, wait, Frankie, you won scholarship? I said, yes. She says, $300. I said, yeah. She said, your father is so proud of you.
Wow.
I said, my father? She said, he's like the American gentleman. They always looked up to non-Italians. I said, are you just telling me this? She said, Frankie, he's a good man. He doesn't know better. He loves all his children. I said, he has a strange way of showing it. So one time when I was talking to Peter, you know, as an adult, and I got onto that, he says, well, you know, you're the smart one. I said, you're smart in your profession. He said, Pa was always different with different people. There's a lot of wisdom in that, too. I said, but you don't know that when you're young. I'm talking about when I was even 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about the gardening, when I was 39, I finally learned to drive, and I bought a Chrysler Newport
I remember that.
because I wanted one of the best cars. And my mechanic said that had the best engine he'd ever seen in any car. Whoever put that in was in the right mood. And the thing about the car was, how am I hitting on the car? I just got through with my father.
Yeah, and talking about the car and the motor.
The point I'm trying to make is, once I got the car, I learned more about being free, not having to call cabs and things. But I just mentioned that aside for something Peter had said. But when my father died, I saw him die. And I never forgot that he fell back. And before the death rattle, he said goodbye. And all I could think of was when I went down to call my mother, I couldn't cry. I couldn't cry at the wake because of his mouth. But what I'm getting at is at 39 is when I finally decided to garden. So my brother Pete comes over, and I'm sitting there reading a book. He says, that figures, you're reading a book, the weeds are taller than your plants. I said, if I get a few tomatoes, what's the big deal? So one of the books I was reading by Ruth Stout, the sister of Rex Stout, and she was into organic gardening. So between what I really did learn from my father, because he made me garden continually, was a lot of ideas. So the following year, Peter come over, because I said, do you need zucchini? He said, no, the days you're going to give me zucchini. He couldn't grow zucchini. It's like the rabbits, member of the plant family. And so he said, you did this? I said, yes. He said, how did you get 8 peppers on one plant? I said, of course, if I tell you, you think I'm putting you on. I said, Pa said pepper plants should always touch each other. I don't agree. I think they should have a foot apart. Plus, I use sulfur when I put the plant in the hole. Sulfur. I said, well, actually, if you get a pack of matches, don't light them. Once you have your hole prepared, if you've got compost, put that in first. Put the matches there, cover them, put the plant in. They love sulfur. You could buy garden sulfur. He said, are you putting me on? I said, Peter, try it. You got matches. And I said, as far as the 8 peppers, if you want them to be red, Ma would have told you this, you just leave them on the plant. So anyway, for some reason, he couldn't have good results with zucchini. So on one occasion, more than once, I would call Reed and I said, do you need any zucchini? Because if you plant it correctly, you got too many. So they come up, and he's kind of slightly grumpy. I said, I have tried to tell you what you do wrong is this. I don't care how Pa gardened, and I know he was a truck gardener. When you put in the zucchini, they call it a hill. I said, I'm going to admit, I've also read books I said, but you leave 3 plants, not a dozen, unless you want flowers, which are very useful. The Sicilians stuff them with veal and make a very elegant dish. Or you can bread them and fry them. But if you will put 3 plants in, you can still have zucchini flowers, but on the plants, they're not as confused as nature, or maybe they are. There's a boy plant and a girl plant. On the girl, you'll see a tiny zucchini. Leave that alone. You can pick all of the male flowers, stuff them, bake them, whatever you want. But zucchini can be a nuisance because it's like a rabbit. So I don't know if you ever did that, because periodically she called me once and she said, do you have any extra zucchini? I said, well, bring them over. I said, how do you fix it? She said, I cook it with vegetables and sausage. She brought me a dish, it was good. And so from that, I learned the beauty of gardening, and there is God in the garden. When you think you can put a seed in, and what comes out of a seed. Is this running out?
Mm-mm.
All right. So let me move on from there. We were down to Michael, then my brother Al, who was probably one of the more intelligent brothers, a very good plumber, but never kind to me, never liked me. And I will tell you the story of the potato in regard to Alfred. I omitted Rose. Rose would have been, I think, either before or after Michael. I'll get to her separately. But the story of the potato was, we always had a coal furnace, and they used to bake potatoes on the lip of the furnace. Believe me, you'll never taste a potato like that, because they were potatoes we had grown.
Mm-hmm.
He gave everybody a potato but me. So I'm sitting there, I was probably maybe 8 or 9, and started to cry, and I went upstairs and I told my mother, she said, you come downstairs, he's giving you a potato. We got down there, I said, I don't want it now. And I never forgot that. But he never liked me. And this is what I grew up with, what I call the hierarchy. Being the 10th of the 11, Peter was really the baby. We had to take whatever the older ones decided in behavior. You had teachers, I don't mean this unkindly, but I think 89% of the teachers I had were lesbians who didn't understand children. No, not all, but even the lesbians were good teachers. We did learn. And you go home and you have a strict father, and mother had a pretty good hand. She wasn't the type to say, wait till your father gets home. But she was a great woman. And so he tried to warm up later on, but actually the sad thing is, the last time he was in Utica was when I had recently had surgery. They had never come to visit me when they came up. His wife, Angie, was the family troublemaker.
Oh,
Always felt that her children were entitled. My feeling about entitlement, because I'm your uncle, doesn't mean I owe you anything, any more than I expected an uncle to owe me.
Right.
You follow me, whether you like it or not.
Mhm.
It's the way I was brought up. Well, anyway, unfortunately, he called and I didn't return the call. So when he died, this horrible woman came over and told me off, and I let it all go by. Because I wanted to say, when did either of you ever reach out to me as a young person?
Sure.
So boy, is she a vile woman. She was cruel to my mother and got away with it. But anyway, when he died, I did go to the wake and I brought flowers, I ordered flowers, but I couldn't go to the breakfast dinner. I didn't want to. I've always taken, don't be offended because you're largely German, I have that German side, I think. I don't know where it comes from. My mother used to say, you do have a touch of inglese freddo. Do you know what she meant by that?
Well, a part of English.
Cold English. you know, when the English are cold, by God. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you're very warm, but when somebody crosses you, you can be very cold. She used her, I said, you're right. I said, how can you trust somebody and they do the rotten things I see happening to okay people? She said, well, that isn't right. I said, that isn't right for you, Ma. I said, as if you're that soft. I said, nobody crosses you. Well, but I'm a mother. I said, yeah, well. Anyway, I want to backtrack to Rose. I think Rose was probably before Anne. She married Ben Tomeno, whom was not a favorite in-law. Another one who, I think he just thought he was better than us, smarter. He was intelligent. It was not a happy marriage. I think, you know the expression, when you're not happy with dinner, you might tend to eat out.
Mm-hmm.
That was Rose. We won't go into details. I always ignored that, but the family didn't. Well, anyway, they did have a marriage. They had 2 children. Anita, who's very intelligent, she'd be the first to tell you, who's had 2 tragedies, so you bend a lot with her. Whenever I write her, I write Anita O. Carrier. So she said one time, what's the O stand for? I said, well, you're so smart, figure it out. It stands for omniscient, the know-it-all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, the second one was Bonnie, born much later, whom Rose spoiled rotten, extremely intelligent, and she married a movie star type. And the marriage didn't last long because she went up to her father one day and said, I'm married to this guy, it's like being married to a brother. The implication being that for her good looking he was not a good lover. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
He later married an Italian girl, had 3 children. So she met the one she married, who was a very good lover, but not a good husband. But he's a nice guy. And so I told you the story how she went from bar to bar one night because her daughters did not end up with good men, married or not, but one of them had a retarded child, which she was raising, and when she went to a bar one night, coming home early in the morning because she couldn't find her husband, was cheating on her, and Rose was living with her at the time, the little boy climbed a ladder and got in the pool and drowned.
Wow.
There could have been she could have gone to jail. And whatever happened is she went back to college and she became somebody who ran a nursing home. She's a very intelligent girl. She's no longer pretty. And at that time, Rose was still living in her house and they were not taking care of her. Rose was always clean. But the story about Rose is, of the 3 sisters, Ellen, I'll be getting to shortly, and I never had a good relationship. She was almost 4 years older. Always used to beat me up as a kid. It was just, she was a bossy girl. Looked like a movie star as an adult. But later in life, toward the end, we rebonded after the nightmare vacation I'd had with those people. But anyway, I'm on to Rose and those insurance policies. So what had happened was, at one point when my mother was older and I was living there, and my mother was living with me, I called my eldest sister Ange and I said, look, Ma is at a point where she should be with a woman. I can't bathe her, and I'll be honest, she is driving me crazy. Anything I put in front of her, and if anything wasn't exactly the way she'd say, you see, a mother could take care of 11 children. 11 children can't take care of one mother. I said, Ma, I cannot hear that over and over. I am not a servant, not that you should treat a servant the way you speak to me, but you should be with one of the girls. It did not work out with Icicle Ange, that's my nickname for that sister, who was a good woman, resented being the second mother and all. And so when Ange came back from her visit in California to see Nurse Smugsnip, she went with Rose, whose husband was initially reluctant to have her because they never liked each other. Ironically, he took care of her a lot and he was good to her, but he did get a fancy car, money, but the nursing home would have taken it. So anyway, one day Mother calls me, Frankie, bring over all the insurance policies. I said, why? Why? Just do as I said. You don't think I had enough sense to take mine out? And brothers and sisters, I brought them over. I mean, if I had been a little sensible, I mean, we are human, you would have thought I'd at least take mine out.
Mm-hmm.
When Rose got those policies, there were forged names. And those policies, which they only paid 10 cents a week on during the Depression, most of them were worth $3,000 or $4,000, at least $3,000. The saving bonds that Peter and I used to put a quarter in each week, all gone. They'd accumulated. So who cashed them? My mother, the way she did learn to write her name, but you wouldn't know it was Rose Damiano. That wasn't on any of them. And when she died, the family was very resentful. And of course, the one who had the most money was Al the plumber, and he was the most resentful. No one bothered with her except foolish Frank. I went over. I never made an issue of it. And ironically, Rose wouldn't be the first person seduced by money. And when she got old and needed help, and she was living in her house, she built a house for Bonnie with money. No one bothered with her but me. And the thing that's most interesting of the three sisters, who do you think was the one I liked the most?
Yeah.
Rose. I forgave her weaknesses. And I told you I did play on TV once, and I looked good, and it went well, and she was telling the cameramen how to move the cameras. I wish we had a copy of that.
Oh, that would have been nice.
I was like 32, and I did play beautifully that time. I was always known that I had a beautiful touch at the piano. And God, I'm always saying all the good things about me, but let God deal with the things that weren't so good. The point I'm trying to make is to grow up in that environment. These are basically good, dysfunctional people, which were part of a whole group of first generation children from immigrants, you understand? We actually had it better than most, but I didn't know. Because there was one of my adult students, we were talking, she says, Scott, if we got an orange for Christmas, that was a treat. I said, your mother didn't make some kind of Christmas dinner? She said, no, we didn't have any money.
Wow.
I said, we always had Christmas, not gifts, but the family. Well, anyway, I got back to Rose. I got down to Michael and Al, and then comes Ellen. Now, Ellen was a very intelligent girl. Are you falling asleep on me, but the machine's working?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
But anyway, she quit school. She should never have done that. She should have at least finished. But she got an equivalency diploma, and she met Bob Schoolmaker. This is an interesting story. I may not be 100% accurate because I'm known for my stories. But Bob Schoonmaker used to see her downtown, and he liked her, but she didn't care for him. And one time he followed her home. Now that was at a time when people were secure, you know, coming home.
You didn't worry.
She would have decked him anyway. She was tough. So he's sitting on the porch, and she said, "You better take off. I've got 8 brothers." He said, "I'm in love with you. I'm going to marry you." She said, "Oh, really?" So she goes in the house. She says, "Ma, go look what's out on the porch." This kid followed me home. He says he's in love with me. He's going to marry me. So my mother goes out, and she looks at him. She said, "You want to marry my daughter? Come in."
Oh my God.
He's only about 19. She's 3 years older than him, maybe 4. And she said, "He's okay." She says, "I don't know if he knows what he's getting into dating my daughter, because she was into women's lib before they heard of women's lib." He did marry her. They had a marriage that was not always easy, but he loved her. And when she died, I think it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, it was in September, he called me. But then I'll tell about the vacation with those people. And said, "Frank, would you get on the phone and contact relatives, because Ellen did die." And he said, "I want to thank you again for the painting with the yellow roses," because she liked yellow roses. And so he put a thought in my head. I know at these wakes, generally people get wreaths and florals. I called the one on York Street. Rosie probably remembers.
Chester's.
Yeah.
Chester's.
Or was it?
And
Yeah.
I said, "I want this sent to California." I had the funeral home and all. I said, "But what I want is a plain vase with 7 yellow roses and backup flowers in shades of purple or light purple and very little greenery. But it must be just 7 yellow roses." And she said, "Why do you want orchid and purple?" I said, "Well, in art, yellow and purple always work." So this message was forwarded to California. And Bob called me and he said, "Frank, what do you think is the first thing people noticed when they came in? Not the floral arrangements, that vase of flowers."
That's unique.
And on it I said, "Rest in peace, Ellen. Love, your brother Frank." Now he brought that to the cemetery. In California you can't plant flowers, but they have an opening where you could set a vase. He said they stayed yellow for about 3-4 weeks.
That's unusual too.
But this is the morbid part. He still goes to that cemetery every day. That's not healthy. And one time he called me, he said, "I'm at the cemetery, I'm having lunch with Ellen." I said, "Please, Bob." He said, "Well, I stopped at McDonald's, I'm eating 2 hamburgers," and he said, "I went to therapy and they said, we can't help you. You won't let up." So I stopped calling him. And he actually moved. He lived at some fancy section, trying to think of it. They were lucky. They bought a condo when the rates were down. He moved back to Fullerton because he was driving 30 miles every day to go visit this grave. He moved back to Fullerton because it's closer to the grave.
Wow.
But anyway, to get it back to Ellen, when they came to Utica one last time while Mother was still alive, and they said, "We want you to come to California for a vacation. It'll be the best vacation you ever remember." It definitely is the one vacation I'll never forget.
So you went with your mother, Uncle Frank?
No, my mother was old. She was home. This was another time when they came. I went, and they had me pay for everything. if we went to, what's the thing, that Disneyland or whatever you call it,
Mm-hmm.
I had to pay for that, the food. They take me to dinner, I paid.
Wow.
And so a friend from Vegas, because I had first gone there, said, "Man, with that 600, you could have gone to Italy at that time." So when I finally left, because Bobby was always trying to get money out of me and I wouldn't give it to him, and I was inclined to say, at your age, couldn't you get a job as a bag boy?
Mm-hmm.
Just sat around. But he even hesitated to eat. Other than the first time, she never cooked anything. And Joanne, who was really a beautiful girl, died at 37. She married a black man when people didn't accept it. She had 6 weeks to finish high school, but Ellen was so tough with her that she quit school, got a job in a restaurant, and met this black boy from a good background, but he was no good. Used to beat her up, did drugs. I mean, even then, I have always liked to think I've had the ability to accept people as people. I never met him. So she had a baby, and the girl, for all appearances other than being black, looks like a very pretty white girl.
Mm-hmm.
She never fully adjusted to that. She would say, because see, for a long time, Ellen wouldn't go to see her daughter. They'd have to bring the baby out to the car. She wanted nothing to do with the black husband. And so when Joanne died at 37, then she dealt with this little girl who would say to her grandmother, her grandma, she's very intelligent too, her name is Brenda Toonies, or she's married now, bad marriage. And she said, "But when am I going to turn white like you?"
Oh.
Oh,
And she says, "Darling, you're not going to your father's," she used the N-word. And she said, "Well, can't you do something to make me look like you?" She said, "You do look like us, but you have dark skin." Well, it finally worked out that Ellen's second son married, who is a nice boy. Bobby I never liked. And he married for money. So eventually, being good looking, he cheated on her and whatever. But he has a daughter named Scarlett. Ellen poured a lot of love into Scarlett. She should have reached out to Brenda's grandchildren. They were very unattractive mixtures, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And Brenda said one day, "You prefer your white grandchildren over us." All of that isn't true, but I think it was true. Let's face it,
Yeah, she.
that prejudice is never going to completely go away. We're making progress, right?
Yeah, especially back then.
Pardon me?
Especially back then. It
Yes. We're talking 45 years ago, maybe. I mean, Brenda has to be in her 40s. So anyway, Brenda, Joanne, before she died, had married an Irish man, who was not a good man. They had a white son, handsome kid who went bad eventually. He would use his Social Security number to gamble. He'd bring the kid over, he needed shoes, a haircut, and Ellen, who was more outspoken than I, believe it or not, there is somebody, or was somebody, say that money should be used to take care of him. He has carrot his hair, isn't he? She said, "You're just useless and no good. Get the hell out of here."
Well,
Leave your son. So periodically he would bring the son. And she partly raised him, but he turned out bad. The influence. He loved his father. So anyway, that was Ellen. So I didn't speak to her for years. And then what happened when Joanne died, to me, blood is blood. In spite of what I said about Lord Wind and Al. And so I called her and we reconnected. And at least we were civil with each other. Then about 5 years ago, I was telling my friend Lou, another old man like me, he's got 2 years on me. He said, why don't you call her and patch up things? He said, you're going to be very sorry if she dies before you and you didn't. I said, okay. So I called and we did reconnect. And when she died, I used to call weekly. And I'm glad that I was one of the last persons. It was sad to hear her say one time, because she was very arrogant about her intelligence. She'd say to me, you may have gone to college, but you realize I'm more intelligent than you. I said, Ellen, in my lifetime, I have met people more gifted and intelligent than I, but you're not one of them. She always had an answer. She says, well, you know, in education does not make you intelligent. It develops intelligence if you have it.
Exactly.
Is it about run out?
No. I was just watching
All right.
the
Well,
love.
anyway, I felt so sad because the last time, can you lift it, or he's going to yank the whole thing away?
I'm gonna get it
He
off.
wants to get by you to pee, I think. He can get by to go on the pad, can't
Is
he?
it? Yeah.
Let me lead him to it, or would you just grab his leash and just
Yeah, I could
direct him
pause
to that
this.
pad near you when you're ready?
Come
I'm
on.
positive he has to pedal.
Come on.
See, let him get near there.
Come on.
And can you straighten that out? Your chair sort of
Oh, sure.
got part of that curled. When he misses that, it's such a bother to clean it up. Now he knows he can go there.
Come on.
So he will. I know this dog's habit 100%.
There he goes. He's going on his own.
Boy, did it take something to learn to teach him to use them.
Oh man, it's nothing.
There he goes. It's gonna go.
I will tell you that story. I will interject this. I love the dog. No, he's going to do it when he's good and ready. He's probably going to get the leash wet. I've been through that before. Did he finally go?
Yeah.
See,
Yeah, there he
luckily
goes.
it's on there. What had happened was last November, I realized, I said, I cannot take this dog out 10
Let's check it
times a
out.
day this winter. He has a bladder problem.
Oh yeah.
And I called the vet. I said, I never paper trained him. And I said, I can't take him out this winter, and I am not giving up my dog. I said, he's not adoptable, not that anybody will accept his behavior. She mailed me these things. I said, none of this is going to work. So I called, listen to this, a dog trainer. He said, listen, you sound like a nice guy. The dog's 16, forget it. He can't be trained. He said, if you want to bring him here twice a week. I will train him to do other things, and possibly I can get him to learn to use the training pads. I said, mister, I don't have a car. I can't bring him to you twice a week. He said, well, good luck. So there's a woman in the other building who has a blind dog, and my dog does not like other dogs. He thinks he owns this spot in front of the building because that's where he pees. And if they go there, he gets real ugly. And so she's there, and she said, what's wrong with your dog? I said, lady, there are people here who don't like each other. My dog doesn't like other dog. And I told her my problem. She said, I'll give you a training pad. Try it. So I put the training pad by the door, and the dog's looking at it as if to say, what's this? I said, mister, you're going to learn to use this because you're not going. So I brought it outside. Meanwhile, I had her buy me a pack. And I put it under where he likes to piddle, brought him out, he wet it, and I brought it in. I set it down over some newspapers. I said, you're going to learn to use this inside. 9 times out of 10, he does.
That's great.
People don't believe that, so I called the vet. I said, well, when I told that dog trainer, I said, you haven't met me. He's going to have to learn to use that. I can't give him up. And he is not going to die unhappily. So when I brought him for his checkup in July, all I got was bad news. He has a failed kidney. Cataracts are developing. His hearing is almost gone. he's losing weight. And she said, with a failed kidney, you have to avoid protein. I said, well, young lady, I'm going to tell you something. While he wants to eat, he's going to eat anything he wants. When he starts to lose his appetite, I've been through this before. I will deal with it. But I said, my concern is, I love the dog, but I wish he would go in his sleep. Because when it's his time, I will have to put him under. She said, oh, I don't do that. I said, you're a vet. If you don't, somebody here has to. And I said, I will be present. I will pay for that extra money for the relaxant so that he knows I'm there. And somebody in the building said he would take the dog. I said, not unless you take me and my walker. The last person he knows will be me. And so I'm hoping it doesn't come to that because I don't know if I'm strong enough.
I know, they're like, they're
I can't
family.
imagine living without this bossy dog who follows me constantly, no longer wants to sleep on my bed. There are changes developing. And in the morning, it's a burden to deal with him first thing.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I might trip on this. I finally have enough sense to take that off at bedtime because occasionally he's pulled the table. But you see, I leave it on him because if somebody comes to the door and he starts to run, I can put my foot on the leash. Plus, I always tie him to a door because if the manager comes in, she doesn't want a dog sniffing or possibly nipping at her slacks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I live here. So the point is this. What I eat, he always wants part of. And I give him that and the dog food. I prepare his food the night before. In the morning, he has to wait. I mean, I have to put my glaucoma drops on and get these horrible support hose on. And I do have to use the bathroom, dog or not.
Yeah.
Wash my hands, get things going, so he waits patiently. But he will not eat unless I sit here and put the support hose on. I have to be here or he won't eat. I said 5:30 in the morning at my age, I'm going through this with this dog. Most sensible dog would eat. So this morning, because I got up, he didn't eat the dry. I said, too bad, eat that later. He ate part of what I had dinner for last night. I warmed some for him. Now, what I'm saying is, let me get to the final person, Peter. Peter has been the best of brothers. We were close growing up. Totally disliked in personalities. But in his own way, Peter periodically said, well, you're a brain, I'm not. I said, but you are in your profession. I said, much of what I've done in music, if there's such a thing as reincarnation, I believe I was once Egyptian because of my interest in cats, and I think another time Russian. And I said, the Russian pianists are my favorites. I think I played the piano in another life. So when I came into this life, a lot of things I just did. He said, that's interesting, but whoever understands what the hell you're talking about. That's the way Pete was. I said, well, as a Catholic, we're not supposed to say that about reincarnation. But anyway, this story about the garage, when I bought the house, he always did his sheet metal work there. And I didn't care till I bought my car. And it wasn't so much that it was a new car, but winters are rough up
Brutal
north.
up
You've
here.
lived here. And one time I said, Peter, you hardly use the second stall. I'd look to put my car there. Well, you can't. What are you going to do, put me out? And then I lost it. I said, all I want is you are not really using this part.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the bottom line, as good as you've been to me, this is my garage.
Right.
I don't care. So I very foolishly sent a letter through my lawyer saying he was to vacate half of that. He was furious. He said, I'm going to get out of here. I'll never talk to you again. I said, if that garage means that much, you keep it. No. You sent a letter. And so we didn't talk for I don't know how many years. And then I told you when the furnace was going, I went down one night and Rita wasn't there, and I said, well, could I have a cup of tea? You want tea, make it. And I said, now look, I made the tea. I said, I have to get a new furnace. Even I have enough sense to know this one's going. Now you're my brother, you're first rate, I'm coming to you first. I don't want additional hard feelings if I call somebody else. I'll do it, but I want $3,000 cash, so I don't have to report it to my taxes. I said, okay. I said, but if your eldest son is working, you control him. I don't like him. He's not a Damiano. He's a user. And so they put in the furnace, and of course his son did do things I didn't like. And then we reconnected, and then when he had that first bypass, I went to the hospital with a check for $50, and whoever cashed it didn't give him the $50.
Oh, jeez.
Rita said she never saw it. I said, well, I didn't save the canceled check, but I do have one, and I'm not going to call the bank for it because it's gone. But the story about his first son was I reluctantly hired him just to side the front of the house. I couldn't bear it because of the west wind.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted $1,000, but you generally pay when the job's done, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
But periodically he gotten up to taking $700. There's $300 that would have to be finally paid, but when he got toward the top, he didn't want to do it. Left the ladder leaning against the front of my house. Imagine if a child had fallen,
Wow.
gotten hurt or died. And so I called my brother. And I said, look, Pete, he isn't finished. And the first thing Peter said, my son's got to be paid. I said, paid when he finishes it. No, he's got to be paid if you don't want him back. I said, it's not a matter of wanting him back. He doesn't want to do this.
Right, because it's the heights.
I said, before you get the $300, because I will not speak to your son, you send Michael over to put that ladder along the driveway where the grapes are, so nobody gets hurt. That can't be leaning against my house. So I called Pop, the good brother-in-law, and I said, look, would you bring $300 down to Peter? It's Friday afternoon. I can get to the bank on Monday. You know I'm good for it. Yes, he did. So he brought it down, and Peter said, well, give Frank back $50. I said, oh. So I had to pay another $300 to these Irish guys to do that. And meanwhile, along with everything else, his son had cut all the shrubbery in front of my windows,
Mm-hmm.
which gave me privacy when I taught. So then these wiseacre kids from Proctor, if they're walking by and I'm giving a lesson, would knock at the window. When the shrubbery was there, they didn't do it. So one of these guys said, listen, I'm going to drill holes in all of these stumps.
Mm-hmm.
And you get salt and pour it in these every 3-4 days. That will kill the roots. Then eventually somebody can just lift these up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened. I didn't know. And from then on, I planted flowers, and people would knock at the windows. He was not much of a person, Peter Sr. He milked the city throughout raising his children. He does love his children.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big plus. But he's not a good man. And they, who was I talking to? Well, I mean, really, when you talk to Anna Marie, the only one I could get her to agree to that's a nice person is Mary Rose. I can't believe they're all as bad as she says. I always thought Michael was a nice boy. And Shannon, you know, she thinks her last name is Hanalusa, because Mary Rose married a good-looking Ukrainian
Mm-hmm.
who cheated on her.
Wow,
And she
that's
tried to break the windshield, and a guy upstairs prevented him, and she ends up marrying him. He seems okay. And I wonder if she ever told a girl. She was drop dead gorgeous and a nice girl. And Anna Marie said, well, she's not so nice anymore. I'm about to say, Anna Marie, are any of your siblings good?
Yeah.
Can they be as bad as she portrays them? Now, her husband also has a situation with his birth father, because his mother was a very pretty girl who had a relationship with this boss.
And that was Joyce, right?
No, that's
No,
Julie.
Julie, rather.
That
She's a
she's-
very
yeah.
pretty woman. And she did have these two children, and they have his last name, because Gary's half Dutch. And at one time he tried to contact these relatives. They didn't want to even meet him.
Wow.
And I said, but if they had, no, let's say, I find him a little cold at times, but he's a good guy. He raised two children, and the one thing you will notice, they were raised with good manners. I'm
Very
from
nice.
a generation that's still impressed when I see young people who have good manners and style. He made a good marriage, is a decent guy. He's not a drug dealer, a thief. Why wouldn't you at least want to meet him? But what about your story? You see, everybody has a story. The part that's sad is they've missed out.
Mm-hmm.
Now his son has done very well. The other one's a gym teacher. And I said to Anna Marie, if I had been invited to your wedding, I would have gone. And I said, when your son graduated, I wasn't invited. Actually, I gave Peter a few dollars, and I said, well, give this to your grandson. And he sent me a nice thank you note. I mean, I had never really met Gary Jr.
Mm-hmm.
But the one time I heard him talking to people at was some gathering, and we had met, and they were talking about fathers, and he was saying, this other one was saying that his father was in the military, and he says he's tough. So what are you talking about? You should meet my father. When he says move, you do
Yeah.
exactly what he says. But he's a good father. He said, well, the other guy said, well, my father, I don't know if he's so good. But he said, Gary loves his children. I don't know what their relationship is. Anna Marie and her husband, they're together.
Yeah, they seem they